We all have a worldview, that lens that shapes how we see absolutely everything. But have you ever stopped to actually inspect it? Today, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to run a 4-point inspection that you can use on any belief system, including your own, to see if it's really built to last.
So let's just start with the biggest question of all. Is the life you're building standing on solid rock, or is it on shifting sand? It's such a powerful metaphor, isn't it? Because it gets right to the heart of the matter. A belief system isn't just some abstract idea. It's the very foundation of your life.
So many of us today, myself included sometimes, take what you could call the smorgasbord approach to what we believe. We pick a little of this philosophy, a little of that spiritual idea, whatever feels good or seems right in the moment. The problem is, this can create a worldview that's fragmented and, honestly, full of contradictions.
And the stakes here are incredibly high. A worldview that's just built on the shifting sands of feelings or what's popular, it just doesn't hold up. As this quote gets at, when the inevitable storms of life hit, and they will hit, disappointment, suffering, doubt, a weak foundation just crumbles. But a solid one, that provides real stability.
So this leads to a really practical question, right? How can we test the blueprint before we build our entire lives on it? Is there a way to, kick the tires on a belief system and see if it's actually solid? Well, the answer is a resounding yes. And look, this isn't about blind faith or just hoping for the best. There's actually a rational, systematic way to evaluate any worldview. We can put it through 4 foundational stress tests to see if it's really built on solid ground. This is all about an honest, rigorous look at the facts.
All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to look at 4 key tests: coherence, correspondence, explanatory power, and finally, livability. Then we'll pull it all together and talk about what it means to build on bedrock. So let's dive in.
Okay, first up is the coherence test. The question here is simple, but it is absolutely crucial. Does the blueprint contradict itself? Is it logically sound from the inside out?
So, for a worldview to even have a chance at being true, all of its main claims have to fit together without contradicting each other. Think about it like a well-designed blueprint for a house. You can't have a solid wall right where the front door is supposed to go. It just doesn't work. It has to be internally consistent.
Let's use Christianity as a case study here. Proponents argue that it presents a really coherent narrative. It starts with a good God creating a good world. Then humanity rebels, which creates this problem of sin and separation. Now, God's perfect justice requires a payment for that sin, but his deep love wants to provide a way back. The cross, then, is presented as this incredible moment where God's justice and his love are both perfectly satisfied. Now, people have debated the details for centuries, but you can see how each piece is designed to logically connect to the next.
Now, what does a worldview look like when it fails the coherence test? Well, here's a classic example. The statement, "There is no objective truth." Just think about that for a second. The person saying it is presenting that statement as if it were an objective truth. So, if the statement is true, it has to be false. It completely collapses under its own weight. It's an incoherent blueprint.
All right, let's move on to our second test, the correspondence test. This one takes us from the internal logic of the blueprint out into the real world. The question now is, does this blueprint actually match the world we see all around us?
We see a true worldview can't just be internally consistent. It also has to line up with the facts of reality. The claims it makes about history, about science, about the human experience, they have to correspond to the evidence we can actually observe and verify. It has to be externally consistent.
And here you can see how defenders of Christianity argue that it passes this test. Take history, for instance. The New Testament claims to be based on eyewitness reports. Well, historians have been able to verify many of the geographical locations mentioned, and there's a strong scholarly case that these documents were written very close to the events they describe. Then you look at science. The Bible has always claimed that the universe had a beginning. What's fascinating is that 20th century cosmology, with the Big Bang Theory, came to the very same conclusion. Now, these aren't meant to be knockdown proofs, but they are really interesting points where the claims of the worldview seem to correspond with the external evidence.
This brings us to our third test, and this one is a big one, the explanatory power test. Here we're asking, does the blueprint offer a satisfying explanation for the whole world, not just little bits and pieces of it?
A truly robust worldview needs to have a really wide explanatory scope. It should have something meaningful to say about the biggest questions of life, right? Like, why is there something here instead of just nothing? Why does our universe seem so perfectly fine-tuned for life to exist? Where do our feelings of objective right and wrong come from? What even is a human being? The worldview with the greatest explanatory power is the one that best answers the most questions.
And this comparison chart is where the differences between worldviews really start to pop. Let's take naturalism, the view that the physical world is all that exists. When you ask about the origin of the universe, it has to admit that what came before the Big Bang is a total mystery to physics. Fine-tuning? Well, it's often chalked up to an incredible coincidence. Objective morality? Many would say it's a useful illusion that helped us survive. Now look at Christian theism. It offers a very different type of explanation for each of these: a transcendent creator, an intelligent designer, a moral lawgiver, and human beings made in God's image. The point isn't to say one is simple and one is complex, but to ask, which worldview offers a more comprehensive and satisfying explanation for all the things we experience?
All right, we've finally arrived at our fourth and final test, the livability test. This is where it gets really practical. The blueprint might look great on paper, but can you actually live inside the house that it built?
A worldview isn't just an intellectual puzzle, you know? It has to be livable. It has to provide a real, meaningful foundation for life as we actually live it. It needs to give us a reason to get out of bed in the morning, a framework for making sense of pain, and a real basis for hope when everything seems dark.
So when we look at Christianity through this lens, believers would say it's a faith that is deeply livable. It offers an ultimate purpose, not just to exist, but to know and love God. It doesn't ignore suffering, it actually gives it meaning inside a bigger story of redemption. It provides a real way to experience forgiveness and grace, and it grounds an unshakable hope even in the face of death. For Christians, it's not just an idea, it's an invitation into a life-changing relationship.
So after our 4-point inspection, what's the verdict? When we really put a worldview to the test, any worldview, we start to get a much clearer picture of whether it's built on sand or on solid bedrock. So let's recap those tools really quickly. First, is it coherent? Does it make sense on its own terms? Second, does it correspond? Does it line up with the facts of the world? Third, does it have explanatory power? How much of reality can it actually account for? And fourth, is it livable? Can you build a meaningful life on it?
And we end right back where we started, with this incredibly powerful image. A worldview isn't something to be casual about. It's the foundation of everything. The wise builder inspects the ground, they check the blueprint, and they build on a foundation that they know can withstand anything.
So the final question really is for you. The unexamined worldview is a dangerous place to live. I just encourage you to take these 4 tests and really apply them to your own beliefs. Be honest, be rigorous, because the question of what foundation you're building your life on, well, it's the most important question you will ever answer. Thanks so much for watching.